cycling and running. You would think that if you're good at one, you'd be good at the other as well. After all, both are heavily reliant on cardiovascular fitness, which is heart and lungs, right? Wrong. There are a couple of examples of top-level runners who've become world-class cyclists, such as Mike Woods. There are a couple of ex-professional cyclists who found success in running, such as Christian Meyer, but they are exceptions. For the most part, a professional or ex-professional cyclist would be a decent club-level runner, and a world-class runner can struggle in a third-cap bike race. Why is that? Well, I've been doing some digging.
You might not know it, but you might be doing more damage than you realise, and
chances are their engine's just been built up, but they've got like a Ferrari engine and a Volkswagen body, like
it makes sense to introduce it into your routines.
I'm fit, but that leg strength just didn't transfer for me.
So basically, the impact that you get with every stride that you are doing, the muscles are not used to this.
Our bike handling skills aren't great
because of just the big engine that I had from running. I was able to get success quite quickly, even in local group rides.
I think people have realised there's funner ways to keep fit when stuff isn't going well. So
I was still blissfully ignorant to how hard it would be to get to the top of the sport at a professional level.
Now, you might be wondering why I first thought about this, or you might not be wondering, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So about 4 months ago, I did a 5-kilometre running race against fellow GCN presenters Alex, Sy and Connor for GTN, and I trounced them. Actually, maybe trounced is not the correct word. I annihilated them. However, on a bike, they would annihilate me and trounce me and drop me and embarrass me. The list goes on. Their Zone 2 power is about the same as, or even higher than my FTP. The difference in fitness on a bike is huge. So how did I beat them running? There are a number of examples of cyclists who've tried running with differing results. The most successful recent examples are Tom Dumoulin and Nasser Bouhanni. So in cycling, they were completely different riders. Bouhanni, a sprinter who won 70 races in his career. Dumoulin, a time trialling and climbing specialist who won the Giro d'Italia and finished runner-up at the Tour de France. But they're both pretty good at endurance running. Dumoulin posted a 32-minute, 38-second 10K run soon after he retired from racing, and more recently ran a 1 hour, 8-minute, 42-second half marathon. That is an average pace of 3 minutes 16 per kilometre or 5 minutes 14 per mile. Nasser Bouhanni ran the Frankfurt Marathon at the end of 2024, completing it in 2 hours, 34 minutes and 36 seconds. Former GCN presenter Emma Pooley is arguably the best example on the women's side. A world champion in time trialling, she later became a world duathlon champion 4 times and ran the Lausanne Marathon in under 2 hours 45. However, Emma had a background in cross-country running. In fact, it was an injury in that discipline which indirectly resulted in her getting serious about cycling. So perhaps there's an efficiency component in running that you have to learn as a youngster. So what is it that makes the two sports so different? Yes, there are people who are good at both, but most of the time, that's because they've practiced both for a long period of time. Duathletes and triathletes are prime examples. It's rare to see someone at the top of their game in one of those disciplines go into the other and reach the same level. Much of that is down to the difference in muscle recruitment between the two and the efficiency that's built up from years of practice. So in running, there's a lot more impact. Every stride you take involves moving your whole body mass forward with the use of one leg. The elasticity of your muscles and tendons and their ability to store and then use kinetic energy effectively is a large part of what makes an efficient runner. The better the spring in your step, so to speak, the faster you'll go. But that isn't nearly as important for cycling. The motion of striding versus pedalling is also very different. With pedalling, almost the whole motion is concentric, i.e. the muscles are generating force whilst contracting. With running, there's a much more even split between concentric and eccentric movement, the eccentric part being the deceleration each time you plant your leading foot on the floor. And it's this movement that is completely alien to anyone that concentrates entirely on cycling. If you've ever got out for a run and found you can barely walk and have to shuffle up the stairs for the next few days, this is probably why. Now, there is a degree of eccentric movement while you're walking, but since you have 2 feet on the ground most of the time, the loads are significantly less. Cyclists often have tight hip flexors as well, which can hinder running speed. That's from the relatively small range of movement that your hip flexors get while cycling, but it can become even worse if combined with sitting a lot at a desk. And it's why a lot of cyclists, when they run, look like they're trying to get home as soon as possible to do a poo. Or, as one commenter described my running style a few years ago, like a newborn giraffe. So, there are some biomechanical reasons why a cyclist would struggle to replicate their on-the-bike performance in running, but what about the other way around? There was a recent article in The Guardian that featured 2022 World 1500 metre champion Jake Whiteman. Injured the following year, he bought himself the bike and the kit and gave it a go.
As an injured runner during that season, and I've had a couple of years of some injuries, it's quite a lonely period. I'd say that it's very isolating. A lot of it is you don't want to get hurt more, so you'd end up going on either a static watt bike in the gym or on an elliptical cross trainer. And for that period, I knew I was going to be out for a while, and I just craved being sociable while I was cross training. So I lived in Teddington at the time, and I walked into Signal Sports in Hampton Wick, and I just said to the guy in there, like, I have no idea about bikes. Like, what's the best start a sort of road bike? And I came away up with a Cannondale Super 6.
Good salesman.
From then, I just went into Richmond Park, and I learned the hard way about being able to clip in. I fell a couple of times, but I just loved the buzz of it. And I loved that I had friends in the area that I could meet up with and go out for 2 hours. And I wasn't just kind of punishing myself mentally even more than I was by being injured, by just sitting on my own in the gym. And I just loved it. And for me now, it's like the more I get into running, I have to be careful, just because there's obviously some elements of risk with riding a bike outside. So I would love to do more of it, but I have to save it a bit more for the off season now, actually getting out on the bike.
Where would you say your strengths and weaknesses lie? I mean, obviously you're supremely fit, one of the best 1500 metre runners in the world. Where do your strengths lie in cycling, and what's held you back, would you say?
It took me a while to realise, because I assumed that when I was getting on the bike, I'm strong compared to some runners, and I'm fit, but that leg strength just didn't transfer for me. So I think my technique of pedaling wasn't great. I think a lot of runners are just used to just pushing down on the pedals the whole time. So I had to kind of retrain myself to push and pull the whole way around. And even now, I'm not great at that. And I think it levels out a bit more on the hills. Like, I felt as though, because I'm light and I've got probably a good set of lungs from running, I felt like the hills were my strengths. But in Richmond, there was some club riders that, if you think you're going well, they would just come and absolutely breeze past me, and it would put into perspective like how much probably more room I have to grow in that sport. And I think that's what I look forward to when I finish running, is getting better at that and trying to join a few of those chain gangs and being able to push my cycling ability, because it just has got a lot of room to grow, I think.
And you said on messages pre-interview that there seems to be more and more crossover in terms of runners going over towards cycling. Did you mean that from like a general running population point of view, or are you finding more and more sort of world-class top-end runners are supplementing their training with cycling?
Because the world that I live in, a lot of the athletes that I am friendly with are kind of the ones that are making teams and are doing pretty well at the moment. And it's mad how many in their off seasons will go on the bike, because it's a fun way to keep fit. So rather than let your fitness drop completely, but by still giving your body a break, people are jumping on the bikes. And for me, a lot of it was like the ability to even stop and have a coffee midway through a ride and then get back on your bike. Whereas if I'm doing that on a run, I'm getting a stitch and I'm having to stop 5 minutes later. But I think people have realised there's funner ways to keep fit when stuff isn't going well. So a lot of it comes from people being injured and realising that you can still enjoy that period of keeping fit and getting back.
He's been world champion in middle distance running recently, but in the brief time he spent cycling, he's been, I don't think you'll mind me saying this, quite average. There's no doubt he could get incredibly good, but the two sports aren't instantaneously transferable, something which World Tour pro Mike Woods knows only too well.
In Canada, the sport is so small. It's not a big sport. The barriers for entry are much lower. It's not as technical. The roads are bigger. And the community is really welcoming. So I was able to get into group rides quite quickly and because of just the big engine that I had from running, I was able to get success quite quickly, even in local group rides, local races. I was still blissfully ignorant to how hard it would be to get to the top of the sport at a professional level, especially because Canada is so far removed from the sport, and I knew so little about the sport. But I just had in my head that I was one of the best runners in the world, so why can't I be one of the best cyclists in the world?
And what was your answer to that question in the end? Now in hindsight, I mean, what were the biggest hurdles that you had to overcome to transfer the running engine into a cycling engine?
Yeah, well, if I knew what I know now, I wouldn't have started. I wouldn't even have tried. I was just so ignorant to how hard it was to rise up the ranks and be a strong cyclist, but also just the races and the politics and getting onto teams, especially as an older rider. I had no idea about that. Like honestly, when I first started riding, I thought you qualified for the Tour de France. I didn't know how it worked at all. Now looking back on things, I'm really glad I took that journey. But yeah, I don't think I was right when I first said that when I started.
So what would you say were the final things that you really had to work on the bike in terms of your weaknesses compared to fellow pros? Because I presume the power came reasonably quickly and it was other parts that you really had to spend time working on.
I had the engine to just get myself in the position, and I didn't need to learn the technical aspect of the sport or the tactical aspect of the sport until I started coming over to Europe. And that was something that I was so far behind on technically, bike handling skills, cornering, the tactics. I was so far behind that, and those things took a long time to build. But I was really lucky. I had a lot of really good people in my corner. A lot of people that helped me along the way in terms of learning these things, and people who were really patient with me, teammates who were really patient with me. Even once I entered the World Tour, I was still so far back in that aspect. I crashed so much in my first 2 years and lost races because of a lack of tactics or a lack of bike handling skills. What
is it that you think that has to change in your engine to first start being competitive in cycling if you've been a very, very top level runner?
Seated power, like aside from the technical aspects, physiologically, certainly seated power. Because even me, if you look at my power files, if I can stand, I'm one of the best riders in the world. But in time trialing, I'm probably top 10 worst time trials in the peloton. I really struggle to produce power in a bent over position. I want to be upright. I want to be tall. I imagine Jake would be much better if he just stood on the bike. But the minute you have to sit down, even to this day, I can't produce that same seated power. I'm envious of guys like even a guy who did transfer over, but Primož Roglič or even you look at Remco Evenepoel, how they can just fold over the bike and still produce big power.
What do you think would hold back a cyclist from being faster as a runner in a 5K, half marathon, etc.?
The biggest thing is the impact adaptation. Yatesy, I know he rocked a sub 3 hour a couple of years ago. I reckon that most runners, the fastest time they could probably run would be right off the bike. Otherwise, they'd need a solid year of training before they could start getting faster, because we don't get nearly enough time on our feet. When I do a Grand Tour, I was thinking about it a couple of years ago. I walk over the course of a Grand Tour. I probably walk maybe 5 kilometers in 3 weeks. Like 5 kilometers, that's it for the entire 3 weeks, and that's just not enough time on your legs. And you need to build up that musculoskeletal system to withstand the impact. And so many there's so many stories of riders, in the off season, the riders that I know that have big engines going out and doing the first run really fast and going pretty good, and then the next day telling me, man, I can't walk. My calves, my Achilles, they're blown. And it's just that impact adaptation.
Mike is a fantastic cyclist. He's won a stage of the Tour de France, 3 stages of La Vuelta, Milano-Torino, and 11 more pro bike races. But as he just said, he's still lacking in some areas, namely producing high power in the saddle compared to his peers, even after well over a decade dedicating himself to this sport. Now, to get a better idea of the physiological and biomechanical reasons behind this, I spoke to Dan Lorang. Dan is a coach currently with Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe, but he's also very experienced in coaching some of the best triathletes ever to exist, including Jan Frodeno and Lucy Charles-Barclay.
I think, first of all, you have to see on the bike you are sitting. So basically, a lot of your body weight is already taken from the bike. So running, you carrying your whole body weight, and even more, because when you are running, you have more than double of your body weight what you have to carry. And on the bike, this is done by your bike. So that is already one big difference. And with this difference comes how big the load is, especially for the bones, for the tendons, so for your whole body. So you have much more load just if you do an easy run or an easy bike. So the load is much higher already when you are running. So that's one thing. Then also from the muscle activation, so it's probably slightly deep. So using the same muscles somehow, but if you look at the percentage of how much you are using glutes, quads, etc., there you also have a little bit of different distribution of the muscle, of the different muscle groups that you are using. So that is one. And then when you look at the knee, for example, at the ankles that you are working in. So on the bike, for example, your hip ankle, it's quite close compared to running. So in running, you are really upright. You run with an open hip ankle. On the bike, it's much closer. The same for the knee angle. So on the bike, you go through different knee angles, and when you look running is you keep the movement in the knee angles quite small, because it's also quite efficient to do it like that. And if you go, for example, to the foot, also the movement of your feet on the bike, basically depending on your riding style. But let's say you have this classical riding style where you really move your ankle, and on running, there is a movement, but it's really individual. It's much smaller, and it even has a big impact also on the outcome of your run. So how much energy you can basically transfer again from the ground force to the movement. So there's a lot of difference from the biomechanical side between running and biking, but I would also call it a lot of difference in terms of load. And because this also makes, for example, when you design training plans, a big factor what you have to consider, how much load you put on your body.
If you took a professional cyclist and you asked them to go out for a 5-kilometer run, and they did, let's say, 18, 19 minutes, which is a long way from the best 5-kilometer runners, what is it specifically that would prevent that cyclist with a huge heart, huge lungs, huge cardiovascular system from being able to kind of reach what you would think their potential is when they first start running?
So basically, the impact that you get with every stride that you are doing, the muscles are not used to this. So there is an eccentric part of it. So it's not like concentric movements like what you have on the bike, but it's an eccentric part. And everybody who did already, for example, eccentric strength training, it causes quite big muscle damage. So if you want to feel really pain in your muscles, do eccentric strength training. And that is what happens in running. So there's an eccentric part in it. Probably for listeners, easy to understand what it is. If you run, for example, downhill, there the eccentric force is even higher, and you get quite a big muscle soreness if you're running downhill and you're not used to it. So this is something where the rider has to get used to it. The efficiency. So in running efficiency is one of the main factors what contributes to better performance. So even with a big engine, it could be that you run really inefficient. Efficiency also comes for example, how your tendons, especially the Achilles tendon, is dealing with the energy that you give in basically to the ground. So basically, when you're running, you give energy to the ground, and then it comes back, it pops back, and basically the tendons get a little bit more stiff with running more. So it absorbs that energy, and then it gives it back into, or it transforms it into a force that moves you forward. And if you don't run, you don't have that any kind of adaptation. So yeah, more or less you have quite an not a really stiff system. And in biking, it's not so important. And if you take an extreme example, for example, swimmers, they are really flexible in the ankle, for example, what is sometimes a big problem when you go running, where you need some stiffness compared to swimming, where you don't want to have that stiffness. So there's even a bigger difference than compared to cycling. But cycling, you have that smooth movement, what you don't have in running.
Beyond whether or not you're going to be good at running, you might be asking yourself whether it could benefit your cycling or your general health. And it's a good question. A lot of pro cyclists seem to be supplementing their on-the-bike training with some running, especially in the off-season. But why? It's something I posed to both Mike and Dan.
Try and run twice a week, especially here in Andorra. There's amazing trails.
Is this the whole year round, twice a week?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I've even ran into Grand Tour just to try and maintain some of the impact adaptation, just so I don't lose it. Nothing crazy, just doing like 3-4K on a rest day. But because I find if I take too long of a break off, it's like I'm starting from square one again. And for me, it's a bit of a get out of jail free card, because in Andorra, we have days where it'll be just too crap to ride outside. And then I can just go for a run. And it's basically transferable. Also, on rest days, being a dad, I'm just so much more pressed for time. And an hour run is an hour and 2 minutes of invested time. Whereas even an hour ride is at least an hour and 45 minutes of invested time. So I like it from an efficiency perspective. And I think just from an overall health perspective, I feel better when I'm running twice a week. Just makes me feel stronger on the bike, makes me feel like a better human. And I think a lot of riders are doing that for that reason. Just feeling more robust, feeling like they can, they're not going to be impacted as much in the off season because they haven't been doing anything but riding a bike.
So from this perspective, I would recommend it. I would recommend them, really to have a deeper look into it, to having the right shoes, looking at, how they are running, to building up slowly. But in terms of health, in terms of be a completer athlete, even I would say it makes sense to introduce it into your routines. So 2 times a week, for example, could be enough, and you will feel the difference. And especially for this kind of rider, for the professionals, you always have to balance. They have a lot of racing and they need recovery. But I think for the normal people, I would really recommend it to add some running, to add a little bit of core training to it. Then you adjust more. It's a healthier thing. Then it's more complete, and you do something for sure for your bones.
Now, you might, after this video, be considering supplementing your cycling with some running. The old saying, though, of don't run until you can walk is probably quite apt here, even though most of you watching this are capable walkers. But running is not something to dive headfirst into, especially if you're already cardiovascularly very fit. I asked Mike and Jake what their advice would be for cyclists looking to give running a go.
My bit of advice would be just build up gradually. Running is a sport that takes a long time to get fit. And even for us, I've done it for over a decade, and I still have to be so careful when I've had an offload from injury and not been running for a bit. So a lot of it is still supplementing your running with other stuff. So if you can still get on the bike, but you want to transition into running, just keep the cycling as much as possible to stay fit and slowly bring the running up, because you might not know it, but you might be doing more damage than you realize. And a stress fracture or a bone injury can come on very suddenly. So a lot of it is when you're getting into it, make sure you're supplementing with enough calcium, collagen. Just make sure that you're doing what you can to make sure your bones can tolerate it, and your tendons, because they'll be the ones that kind of face the full front of getting into running.
The chances are their engine's just been built up, but they've got like a Ferrari engine and a Volkswagen body, like a Volkswagen Beetle body or something like that. It starts slow, like painfully slow, maybe even like 5 to 10 minutes in the first run, and jogging, going slow, and then you just build up really slowly from there. Then after about 6 to 8 weeks, you'll start being able to do some proper runs.
I would start quite simple, and that's also even a method what is used by professional runners or by professional triathletes who got injured. So by 1 minute run, 1 minute walking, and you do this, for example, for 20, 30 minutes, and then you slightly increase you decrease the time of walking, you increase the running time, and until you can run 30 minutes in a row without any break. And from there on, you can probably extend it a little bit. You don't need to go over 1 hour, I think. So if your main focus is cycling, I think if you do 2 times running 1 hour, that's already great. If you even do 30 minutes, that's already great. So that gives already some kind of impact. But start really with this walking, running, because this short rest from running, where you're just walking, gives your muscles the time to reset again, to be recovered before the next minute comes. And then also how you are running is better, it's smoother, and you get step by step introduced to that load.
If you are quite a competitive person, starting slow might not be in your nature. But I'm going to add my own small experience to that of Mike and Jake's advice and say this. I injured myself multiple times by trying to run too fast and or too much too quickly. Thankfully for me, the injuries weren't too serious, but others aren't so lucky. Former British time trial champion Michael Hutchinson sustained a severe stress fracture to his hip whilst training for a marathon after his cycling career, an injury which required emergency surgery. So let that be a cautionary tale. There is absolutely no doubt that running is good for you if done correctly, but please start slowly. Okay, I would love to get your thoughts on this video and your own experiences of running. Let me know in the comments section below. Just before I finish though, if you enjoy features like this on GCN, there is an option to show your appreciation with a small donation. You'll find a super thanks icon just below this video where you can do just that if you want. Thanks for watching everyone, and I look forward to reading your thoughts.